The ramp time will be measured in millionths of a second, and the peak current could be in the tens of millions of amps. This could make a lightning bolt look like a weak flash bulb. How would you go about doing this? And by the way, you can do this probably for less than $1,000. Popular Mechanics estimates maybe $400. Here's a sketch. You have the basic elements in this diagram here is that you have a coil of wire that goes the length pretty much of as much as you can, a long length here. And then you have just inside that coil of wire an expandable soft copper tube. And that's spaced from the wire. And inside the copper tube you have some explosive. Okay? And what you're going to do here, you have a battery of some capacitors to store up a lot of energy and use those capacitors to charge the coil and create the magnetic field around the coil, and then you fire the explosion. Let's see what would happen here. If this is the plot of the electromotive force, magnetic force, and you explode, as the explosion proceeds down this tube, it expands the tube, shorting out the coil, making the remaining part of the coil that's still electrically effective shorter and shorter. And the shorter it gets, the more that is compressing the magnetic field. You'll finally get to the end. You have a pulse that would be measured in the tens of millions of amps in current terms. You have a magnetic wave that will, in a matter of minutes, fry all microcircuits within its range. But then you also have some other effects we'll come to. What are the countermeasures? The typical countermeasure for something like this is what's called a Faraday shield. You probably saw one in the movie Enemy of State, if you remember that cage that Gene Hackman retreated to solve problems and things. That's a Faraday shield. The idea is that the shield will, any impinging magnetism will be grounded, right directly to ground. Foreign military experts suspect that these are not going to be effective enough because very high frequency pulses can penetrate vents and get around some of the ins and outs of that. But there's another issue. The delay time electromagnetic pulse effects, localized surges will create derivative surges, and it's almost like a string of firecrackers. And these localized surges will disable power lines and communication lines. And so they suspect that the electromagnetic bombs, if they can be made as easily as it looks like they can be made, they could be a third world equalizer. This is the kind of thing that terrorists could fabricate, test, improve, whatever, and use quite easily. What could happen to a city is it returns that city to a century ago. No electricity. Electricity becomes something you see when lightning strikes, because you have no power, you have no communications, but you have no microcircuits. And it's interesting that the Indian Institute of Defense specifically fears that Pakistan might have such weapons. As I was reading on this, I was intrigued. Of all the people that are concerned about it, it's India, who's a traditional enemy of Pakistan, which of course is our partner at the moment going into Afghanistan. So it's interesting to watch the things going on. Well, let's take the really scary one that most of us are aware of but probably don't take seriously, and that's nuclear. There are over a dozen countries that are nuclear capable today. U.S., Russia, France, Germany, Great Britain, but also Israel, China, India, Pakistan. But surprisingly enough, South Africa, Iran, Argentina, Brazil, North Korea, Libya, Iraq, all have or certainly will have nuclear weapons. Now, there are 27 countries that are developing advanced ballistic missiles, over 66 countries that have the technology to field a surface skimming cruise missile. Any country that can build a jet aircraft can build a cruise missile. And of course, there's been substantial traffic in stolen nuclear warheads on the black market for over 10 years. That's no surprise. Ever since the Soviet Union started to fall apart, the security that which they had was falling apart. There were all kinds of officers looking to make a buck. These things got on the black market. I know from personal experience that several of these have been sold to Iran. I'm told by people who are watching this area that they believe that Osama bin Laden has some, more than one. We'll see, because I can't imagine having one not using it. So I think most people feel it's not a question if, it's when there'll be some nuclear event. And boy, when that happens, the rule books go out the window. General Alexander Lebed, when he was in the United States, indicated on camera, on I think it was 60 Minutes, he said there were 132 suitcases nukes made by Russia, and 84 of them are missing from inventory. And it's his suspicion that they've been somehow sold to terrorists. Was he making a political statement? Maybe. Is it credible? A lot of people take it very seriously. George Tenet, the director of CIA, says the possibility that a missile armed with a weapon of mass destruction would be used against the U.S. forces and interests is higher today than during most of the Cold War, and it will continue to grow. The paradigm of the past was easy to grasp. Its dominant feature was that it had two superpowers locked in a confrontation with clear limits and well-understood rules. Today there are fewer rules and fewer people willing to play by them, as the constant march of technology threatens to break new paradigms, not today, even before they take shape. And that's from the Global Trends 2015 from the National Intelligence Council. Jesus told us about these things. He said in Matthew 24, verse 22, except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. That's a technology statement. That statement made no sense during the Civil War. If you're reading that to Abe Lincoln, he'd probably have a tough time visualizing the world wiping itself out with muskets and bayonets. You follow me? Today, it's a very descriptive summary of technology that's available to people bent on mischief. But let's remember 2 Timothy 1:7. God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So I'd like to talk now about the most advanced technology in the universe. There's a technology available to you and I that vastly eclipses all the technologies we've talked about. And I'll call that the technology that explores hyperspaces. Paul tells us, he gives us an assessment of our predicament, our intelligence report, if you will. In Ephesians 6:12, Paul tells us, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. And let me paraphrase a little bit. We wrestle not against nuclear weapons or biotech or electromagnetic or whatever. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And those last four terms in the Greek refer to ranks of angels. That's what we're up against. We're not up against Osama bin Laden and his gang, however sincerely committed they are to their viewpoints. We're against the guy that's behind, the guy that they inadvertently are worshiping. That's the guy that we're really up against. And you don't go after him with tanks and B-52s. Although there are a lot of them headed his way. We don't get many glimpses in the Scripture of what I call the dark side, but there's an interesting passage in Daniel chapter 10 that I'll just summarize for you. In Daniel chapter 10, Daniel he fasts for 21 days. For 3 full weeks, he eats no pleasant bread. He just eats a bare diet because he's fasting